Some cities are built on ancient foundations, others are built on war rubble, but a few are built on something they forgot was still flowing beneath them. Rivers that once fed the city, transported its goods, or carried away its waste. Rivers that were eventually buried, covered, and erased from the skyline, but not from beneath the streets. Drop a comment telling us where you are watching from and what time it is right now. We want to see how many countries this video reaches. In 1878, workers breaking ground for a new warehouse in Manchester punched through a street and discovered a stone archway no map acknowledged existed. Water was moving inside, fast. The river had been buried for decades and the city had stopped marking where it ran. The place at number 1 runs beneath one of the world's busiest streets, carrying more than just water, and the people who maintain it refuse to describe what they find down there after heavy rain. Let's begin. London's River Fleet flows beneath Farringdon Road, one of the capital's busiest thoroughfares. It once served as a natural boundary between neighborhoods and a working dock where goods entered the city. By the mid-1800s, the fleet had become an open sewer. The solution was not to clean it. The solution was to bury it. Workers built arch brick tunnels over the waterway and paved streets on top. The river still flows. You can hear it through grates near Blackfriars Bridge. In periods of heavy rain, sections of Farringdon Road have been known to sag or crack as the river surges below. Urban explorers who have entered the fleet tunnels report cold air, constant echoes, and sections where the brickwork has eroded so badly that the ceiling is held up by nothing but rust-stained iron beams. The Environment Agency has documented the tunnels but does not encourage public access. Most Londoners cross Farringdon Road daily and never think about the water moving beneath their feet. At least the fleet is documented. The next river was forgotten entirely until construction workers broke through a foundation wall and found themselves waist-deep in ice-cold water. Seoul's Cheonggyecheon River once flowed openly through the heart of the city. It was covered with concrete in 1958 as part of rapid urban development, and an elevated highway was built directly over it. For nearly 50 years, the river existed only as a drainage channel beneath layers of pavement and steel. In 2003, the city made a decision that stunned engineers worldwide. They tore down the highway, removed the concrete, and restored the river to open air. The project took 2 years. Workers discovered sections of the old riverbed that had collapsed into voids beneath the street. Cars had been driving over hollow ground for decades. Structural engineers found that portions of the highway had been slowly sinking as the buried river eroded support pillars from below. Since restoration, Cheonggyecheon has become a central park cutting through downtown Seoul. But the engineers who worked on the project have stated publicly that other rivers in Seoul remain buried and no one is certain of their current structural impact. What lies beneath Gangnam has not been surveyed, and no restoration is planned. Vienna's River Wien runs through tunnels beneath the old city center. It was buried in stages between 1895 and 1899 after repeated flooding destroyed shops and homes. The decision to cover the river was driven by public health concerns. Open water in densely populated areas carried disease. The solution was encasement. Massive stone channels were built and boulevards were paved over them. The river still flows through Vienna, but most residents have never seen it. The tunnels are accessible through maintenance hatches in Karlsplatz and near the Naschmarkt. During heavy storms, the river rises fast. In 1991, floodwater overwhelmed the tunnel system and erupted through street grates, flooding basements across the First District. City maintenance workers enter the tunnels regularly. They report sections where the walls have cracked and groundwater seeps through. In some areas, the smell is overwhelming. Dead animals, stagnant pockets. Decomposing debris that washes down during floods. The River Wien is not a relic, it is active infrastructure, and when it fails, the city above it floods from below. If you are still here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The rest of this list does not get quieter. A river beneath Moscow that runs through Stalin-era bunkers. A buried stream in Paris that connects to the catacombs. A flow beneath San Francisco that appears only during earthquakes. Moscow's Neglinaya River was buried between 1817 and 1819. It once flowed past the Kremlin walls and served as a natural moat. When the decision was made to expand the city, the river was channeled into underground pipes and covered with streets. Teatralnaya Square sits directly above it. During the Soviet era, sections of the Neglinaya tunnel system were incorporated into secret infrastructure. Bunkers were built adjacent to the river channels. Some connected to Metro 2, the rumored parallel subway system used by government officials. Workers who maintained the tunnels during the Cold War were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. Declassified documents confirm that certain sections of the Neglinaya system were reinforced with steel blast doors. In 1998, a construction crew working near the Bolshoi Theater broke through a wall and discovered a vault filled with files dating back to the 1950s. The vault was flooded. The files were unreadable. The city sealed the breach and rerouted construction. Urban explorers have entered sections of the Neglinaya, Photographs show Soviet-era graffiti, rusted piping, and doorways that lead to tunnels too narrow to follow. The river still flows beneath Red Square, and sections of it remain classified. Paris sits above the River Beaver, a tributary of the Seine that was buried in stages between 1828 and 1912. The Beaver once powered mills and tanneries. By the 19th century, it had become toxic. Waste from dye works, slaughterhouses, and tanning operations turned the water black. The solution was burial. Stone tunnels were built and streets were laid over them. The river now flows entirely underground from its source south of Paris to its outlet near the Austerlitz Bridge. What makes the Beaver remarkable is where it runs. Sections of the buried river pass directly beneath the Paris catacombs. In some areas, tunnel systems intersect. Cataphiles, illegal explorers of the catacombs, have reported hearing water behind sealed walls. In 2004, police entered a restricted section of the catacombs and discovered a cinema, carved seats, a projector, a bar. The room had been powered by an electrical system tapped from city infrastructure. The cinema sat above a section of the Beaver Tunnel when authorities returned days later to dismantle the setup. Everything had been removed. Whoever built the cinema knew how to access the river, and they knew how to disappear. San Francisco's Mission Creek was buried in 1875. It once flowed from the hills into the bay, providing fresh water for early settlers. As the city expanded, the creek became an obstacle. It was filled with rubble channeled into culverts and paved over. Mission Street now runs along its original path. For decades, the creek was considered gone. Then the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake struck. Buildings along Mission Street suffered disproportionate damage. Engineers investigating the failures discovered that the soil beneath the street was saturated. Mission Creek was still flowing underground, and the water had liquefied the soil during seismic shaking. Structures built over the buried creek had no stable foundation. In 2015, construction workers excavating for a new building in the Mission District broke through a concrete slab and found themselves standing in a stone-lined channel. Water was moving through it, fast. The channel dated to the 1870s and had never been documented on modern maps. The city sealed the breach and classified the location. Geologists now believe that several other creeks remain buried beneath San Francisco, and no one is certain where they run or how stable the ground above them is during an earthquake. Brussels is built over the River Seine. The river once flowed openly through the city center, providing water and transport. By the mid-1800s, it had become a health hazard. Cholera outbreaks were traced to contaminated water. The decision was made to bury the Seine entirely. Between 1867 and 1871, workers built vaulted brick tunnels over the river and covered them with boulevards. The Seine still flows beneath Brussels, but its path is nearly invisible. The tunnels run beneath the Central Station, the Grand Place, and the European Parliament buildings. Most of Brussels has no idea they're walking over a river. Maintenance workers enter the Seine tunnels regularly. They report sections where the brickwork has collapsed and water flows directly against building foundations. In 2002, a structural survey revealed that several buildings in the city center had basements that extended into the river tunnel. The walls separating occupied basements from the flowing water were less than a meter thick. In some cases, residents had cut ventilation holes through the walls. They were breathing air directly from the sewer. The city sealed the breaches and issued no public statement. The Seine is still there, and it is closer to the surface than most of Brussels realizes. Yonkers sits above the Sawmill River, a waterway that was buried in stages between 1920 and 1943. The river once powered mills that gave the town its industrial base. As development expanded, the river was seen as a nuisance. It flooded basements, it smelled. The solution was concrete. The river was channeled into a culvert and Getty Square was built on top. For decades, the sawmill existed only as a drainage pipe. Then in 2012, the city began a restoration project. Workers tore up parking lots and reopened sections of the river. What they found beneath Getty Square was not just water. The culvert had become a repository, shopping carts, tires, decades of dumped waste, and in one section, human remains. The bones were examined by the Westchester County Medical Examiner and determined to be historical, likely dating to the early 1900s. No identification was made. The remains were cataloged and stored. The river was cleaned and restored to open air in a controlled channel, but farther downstream, sections of the sawmill remain buried, and the city has stated it has no plans to excavate further. Zurich's Sichel River flows beneath the main train station. The station, Zurich Hauptbahnhof, was built directly over the river in 1871. Engineers constructed a massive stone vault to channel the water beneath the platforms. Trains arrive and depart above a river most passengers never see. The Sichel is not a small stream. During heavy rain, it becomes a torrent. In 2005, flooding in the Swiss Alps sent a surge down the Sichel that came within centimeters of overflowing the vault beneath the station. Had the water breached the tunnels, the entire lower level of Hauptbahnhof would have flooded. thousands of passengers would have been trapped. Engineers have since installed sensors and automated flood barriers, but the Sihel remains a risk. Hydrologists have stated that a once-in-a-century flood could overwhelm the tunnel system. And if that happens, central Zurich will flood from below, the trains will stop, and the river will reclaim the station. Beneath the streets of Brescia, Italy, flows the Bova River, buried in 1938 under orders from Mussolini's government. The river had been an open feature of the city for centuries, running through the medieval quarter. The fascist regime sought to modernize Brescia's image. The solution was to erase the river. Workers built covered channels and paved streets on top. The Bova was forgot. In 2009, a sinkhole opened in the Piazza della Loggia. A car fell through. The driver survived. Engineers investigating the collapse discovered that the buried river had eroded the street foundation from below. Water had been flowing through voids beneath the piazza for years. No modern map showed the river's path. City officials began an emergency survey of the Bova tunnel system. What they found alarmed them. Sections of the tunnel had collapsed entirely. Water was flowing through uncontrolled voids beneath schools, churches, and apartment buildings. Structural engineers determined that portions of Brescia's historic center were at risk of sudden collapse. Reinforcement projects began immediately, but large sections of the Bova remain buried and unmapped, and sinkholes continue to appear. Beneath Ghent, Belgium, the Ley River once branched into smaller channels that flowed through the medieval city. These channels were progressively buried between 1850 and 1950 as the city industrialized. Streets were built over them. Buildings were constructed with basements that extended into the old riverbeds. Most of Ghent forgot the channels existed. Then in 1995, a restaurant owner in the old city center noticed water seeping through his basement wall. He broke through the plaster and found a stone archway. Behind it was a flowing channel, clear and cold. The channel had no official designation. It appeared on no modern map. The city sent engineers to investigate. They discovered that the buried river branch ran beneath an entire neighborhood. Several buildings had basements that opened directly into the water. Residents had been living meters above a river they did not know existed. The city sealed the access points and classified the survey. But urban historians have since confirmed that Ghent has at least 3 other buried channels. And no comprehensive map of their paths exists. Rochester, New York sits above the Genesee River's original course. Sections of the river were diverted and buried in the 1920s during industrial expansion. A subway was built along part of the old riverbed, but the water was rerouted into underground channels. The Rochester subway operated until 1956, then closed. The tunnels were abandoned. The buried river sections were forgotten. In 2013, urban explorers entered the old subway tunnels and posted photographs online. One image showed water flowing through a side passage. The flow was substantial. Engineers from the City Water Authority investigated and confirmed that a section of the diverted Genesee was still active beneath downtown Rochester. The tunnel had been stable for decades, but erosion was now visible. Concrete walls showed cracks, steel supports were rusting. The city issued no public statement. Access to the subway tunnels was restricted further, but the water is still there, flowing beneath a downtown that has no plan for what happens if the tunnels fail. Manchester's River Medlock runs beneath Piccadilly Station and the city centre. It was buried in stages during the 19th century as Manchester industrialized. The river once powered textile mills. By the 1850s, it was chemically contaminated and considered a public health disaster. Workers built brick tunnels over it and covered those tunnels with streets and rail lines. The Medlock is still active. During the construction of the Metrolink tram system in 2008, workers broke through a tunnel wall and flooded the construction site. The river had shifted course underground. Modern maps showed the tunnel 3 meters from where it actually was. Engineers halted construction and conducted an emergency survey. They discovered that sections of the Medlock tunnel had collapsed decades earlier, and the river had carved new paths through Victorian-era rubble and forgotten basements. Some of the new channels ran directly beneath occupied buildings. Structural engineers reinforced sections of the tunnel and rerouted tram construction, but large portions of the Medlock remain buried, unmapped, and unmonitored, and Manchester continues to build above it. Beneath the center of Bern, Switzerland, the Stadtbach flows in tunnels dating to the 15th century. The Stadtbach is an artificial channel originally built to provide water to the old city. Over centuries, it was expanded and eventually covered as streets were built over it. Most of the Stadtbach now flows underground. What makes it remarkable is where it runs. The channel passes directly beneath the Swiss Federal Parliament building. In 1999, during a security review following the Cold War, engineers surveyed the tunnels beneath the Parliament. They discovered that the Stadtbach channel had sections wide enough to walk through. Some extended under multiple government buildings. Access points existed in basements that had not been secured. The survey concluded that the tunnel system represented a security vulnerability. The government sealed access points and installed monitoring systems. But they did not fill the tunnels. The Stadtbach still flows beneath the heart of Switzerland's government, and the people who work above it are not told it is there. London's River Tyburn flows beneath Buckingham Palace. It is one of several buried rivers in the capital, but the Tyburn holds a unique distinction. It runs directly beneath the palace's foundation. The river was buried in stages between the 1730s and 1820s as Mayfair and Westminster developed. Buckingham Palace was built in 1703, expanded in 1826, and became the official royal residence in 1837. Engineers knew the Tyburn was there. They built stone channels to direct the water safely beneath the palace. For nearly 2 centuries, the system worked. Then in 1960, workers conducting routine maintenance beneath the palace discovered a crack in one of the Tyburn tunnels. Water was seeping into a sub-basement used for storage. The royal household brought in engineers to assess the damage. They found that the Tyburn tunnel had shifted slightly due to ground subsidence. The crack was repaired, but the engineers noted that other sections of the tunnel showed signs of stress. A full structural survey was conducted in 1991. The findings were never made public. What is known is that monitoring equipment was installed in the tunnels and maintenance protocols were updated. Buckingham Palace sits on a river, and that river is still moving. Palace maintenance staff enter the Tyburn tunnels regularly. They are required to sign non-disclosure agreements. When asked what they see down there after heavy rain, they do not answer. 15 rivers, 10 countries, and a single thread connecting all of them. The city moved forward. The river did not. It stayed where it was, buried under progress, flowing beneath streets that no longer acknowledge it exists. Which one stunned you the most? Tell us in the comments. The next video takes you to places that were never meant to be inhabited, but someone lives there now. Think about what that means. Every major city you have visited, every street you have walked down, every building you have entered might be sitting above water you cannot see. Water that is moving, water that is eroding foundations in darkness, water that nobody is talking about. The rivers we have shown you are not anomalies, they are warnings. They are proof that cities grow by erasing rather than adapting. That progress means forgetting, and forgetting means danger. Consider the pattern. A river flows through a city. The river becomes inconvenient. Instead of working with the water, instead of building systems that coexist with it, cities choose erasure. They bury it, they pave over it. They install infrastructure above it and pretend it is gone, but water does not disappear. It finds paths, it erodes, it shifts, it waits. And decades later, when a construction crew breaks through a wall or a sinkhole opens in a plaza or floodwater erupts through street grates, we are shocked. We act surprised. But we should not be. We chose this. The engineers who designed the fleet in London knew what they were doing. The officials in Vienna who covered the Wien understood the risks. The city planners in Seoul who buried the Chingyechen recognized they were creating a problem for future generations. They made a calculation. The cost of dealing with the river now versus the cost of dealing with it later. And they chose later. They chose to let someone else worry about it. That is what every buried river represents, a debt that cities are passing forward. Some of these rivers will remain buried indefinitely. London will never uncover the fleet. The Austrian government will not tear up Vienna to restore the Wien. Moscow is certainly not going to excavate the Neglinaya or declassify what remains in those Stalin-era bunkers. These rivers are infrastructure now. They are permanent features of the urban landscape, invisible but essential. Cities have built their entire systems around them. Removing them would require dismantling the cities themselves. But others could be restored. Seoul proved that, when the city decided to reopen the Chingyechen, people responded. The restored river became a gathering place. It brought nature back into the urban core. It reminded people that cities do not have to be entirely divorced from the natural systems they were built upon. It was not a complete solution. It did not undo decades of damage. But it was recognition that the relationship between city and river could be different, could be better. The question is whether other cities will follow. Will Brussels reclaim the Seine? Will Yonkers continue the restoration of the sawmill? Will Paris ever acknowledge the beaver that runs beneath the catacombs? The answer is probably no. It is easier to maintain the status quo. It is cheaper to let the rivers flow in darkness. It is simpler to ignore the risk than to address it. But here is what you need to understand. This is not just about Europe. This is not just about the cities we have shown you. Every continent has buried rivers. Every major city has water flowing beneath it that most residents do not know exists. Tokyo has the Tamagawa Canal running under its streets. Sao Paulo has the Tiber buried in culverts. Mexico City is literally sinking because the aquifer beneath it has been drained. Shanghai is built on marshland that is now subsiding at a meter per century. The problem is global. The solution is being ignored globally. And that matters because infrastructure failures cascade. When a tunnel fails in one section of a buried river, it affects the entire system. Water finds new paths, it erodes adjacent structures, it weakens foundations, it creates sinkholes. We saw that in Brescia, we saw that in Brussels, we saw that in San Francisco. A crack in one tunnel becomes a structural emergency in an entire neighborhood. A buried river that was forgotten becomes a crisis that nobody planned for. This is not meant to terrify you. This is meant to inform you. You are walking above rivers you cannot see. Your city is sitting on water that is still moving, still eroding, still shifting. And nobody is talking about it. The city governments are not announcing it. The engineers are not publishing maps. The media is not covering it. It is just happening, silently, beneath your feet, every single day. If you want to know where the buried rivers are in your city, you can research it. Some cities have historical maps, some have geological surveys, some have nothing. Urban explorers have documented many of them, but official information is rare, and that is part of the problem. We have erased these rivers from our collective memory. We have removed them from our maps. We have built systems that pretend they do not exist, and then we act shocked when they remind us that they do. This is why we make these videos. This is why we research these places. This is why we tell you the stories. Because knowledge changes things, because awareness creates pressure. Because if enough people understand that their city has a buried river, that their street is sitting above water, that their building might be at risk, then maybe something changes. Maybe the next time a city plans development, someone asks about the river. Maybe the next time an engineer sees a crack in a tunnel, someone listens. Maybe the next time a sinkhole opens, it is not treated as a random accident but as what it actually is. A sign, a warning, a message from the water below. The rivers will keep flowing, that is guaranteed. They will keep eroding, they will keep shifting, they will keep finding new paths. The only question is whether we will adapt to that reality or continue to pretend it does not exist. Whether we will work with the water or against it. Whether we will map and monitor and maintain, or whether we will keep burying our heads along with our rivers. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Turn on notifications so you see when we upload new videos. Leave a comment telling us which buried river shocked you the most, or if you know of a buried river in your own city, tell us about it. We read every comment, we listen to what you find, and we will be back soon with more stories about the places beneath our feet. Until then, think about what is flowing beneath your street. Think about the rivers we have forgot. And remember that progress without acknowledgement is just erasure waiting to become a disaster.